When he turned his back from shoulder to shoulder, it looked like as wide as the tailgate of a truck.
And just darkness, literal darkness, just came like all over, just all over me except where I was standing.
This thing let out the most blood-curdling, mind-blowing, spine-tingling scream that you've ever heard in your life, and it cut through me like a knife.
And I knew that they were going to take me. I just knew it. And then the next thing I can remember is being levitated.
Well, when I look in there, I see two big eyes staring back at me.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night.
Hey there, believers. I got a good episode for you today. For those of you on YouTube, know I didn't get dressed up for this session. I just got off school like 5 minutes ago. So I'm not taking the time to even change clothes. Just got to get straight in here on it because there's a very short window of time that I was able to meet up with our guest this week. Her name is Jennifer. She is coming to talk about an encounter she had in 1980 with an alien creature or an extraterrestrial, or what she believes could only be an extraterrestrial creature. I haven't spoken to her more than just a few emails, but it's extremely terrifying. The description of this thing. Okay, I'll let her describe it. But wow, it's an experience. She was in Northern Virginia. I'll let her go into detail about it. But to be face to face with a being that isn't supposed to exist, that will humble you. We'll go ahead and we'll bring Jennifer on. But first, let me just let everybody know again. As of right now, Patreon is closed. You can join through the website at thebumppodcast.com to be a member. The Believers Only section. It's $1.75 a week to join, which I might have to adjust that one way or the other because it looks like the site I go through, they also take a percentage, but I don't know if it's a percentage or a dollar amount. And the way that works is I'm only charging $1.75 a week. Well, they take a 50-cent charge per transaction. So at $1.75, they take a 50-cent charge. That is about 30 to 35% of the whole fee goes to them. Now, if it's a 50-cent charge on, say, $7 a month, like every other show out there, then it's a much smaller percentage. You see what I'm saying? It would take it from 30% to, I don't know, like 12 or something like that. Much more doable. So, smaller than that even, 8%. So that's doable. So I have to see why it's such a huge percentage. And if that's a cut, if they want 30%, then I guess we'll have to go back to Patreon, or I'll just cancel the whole thing and we won't do member stuff. We'll figure it out. But for now, that's what's up. That's why Patreon doesn't have anything going on. That's why you didn't get charged on Patreon. And everything is going to the website, members only. And if you just want to donate to the show, there's a donate button on there too. All right. I think that's about all the changes. Everything. I'm trying to get everything on the website. Working on merch. Nothing yet. I'm trying to wait till probably after the holidays. It's a very stressful time of year. but that's for a Sunday Musings episode, ain't it? That's something I can vent about on one of those special episodes. So what we'll do is go ahead and bring Jennifer on and get into this alien encounter.
Okay. All right. So thank you for having me. As we've been talking over the past couple of weeks, I live a very quiet suburban lifestyle, member of the community, own and run several businesses, a PTA kind of mom, involved in Boy Scouts and so forth. So I don't have this opportunity much to talk about these experiences, but my whole life, since I can remember, I can actually remember being in the crib, having paranormal experiences. And that was the norm for me. I grew up with just sort of having one foot in the spiritual world. And then through conversing with my mom, I realized that she shared that reality with me. So it didn't seem like anything odd was occurring. So the paranormal world I'm very comfortable with, because that was validated for me at a very early age. And, as we've discussed, it's somewhat passed on to my son. But what I contacted you about, because this is only something that I've been relatively recently comfortable talking about, was my experience. I did have an alien encounter when I was 8 years old. And I've had a couple others that were very, very mild. This one was a very profound experience for me. And it wasn't until later in life that I found out my parents, before I was born, also had an alien encounter with some friends of theirs, neighbors. And my husband has also had a couple. My husband's the most straight-laced Virgo man you could ever meet. So, I find myself questioning how much more a part of my life maybe this has been than I've allowed it to be. Because, I don't watch as much of the alien stuff as I do the paranormal stuff. But the stuff because I like to watch that kind of TV, but the stuff that I do watch of the alien stuff, you kind of get this idea that it's not a one and done thing, that they sort of, check in on their test subjects or whatever. So I just kind of find myself, I don't have a lot in that, but I just find myself curious. So to actually tell you about that experience, I was 8 years old, and it was at a bit of a tumultuous. I did have some tumultuous times as a child. My parents was sort of like, quintessential 1970s, 1980s parenting, not the highest responsibility parents known to man. So my parents had separated, and I lived in Northern Virginia, and my brother and I were living with my mom, and my mom wasn't doing so well at the time. So we had a lot of freedom, and we lived in Northern Virginia, but the apartment complex we lived in was kind of out in a forested area, and you kind of had that almost rural feeling to it. Lots of forest around us, and it was, I don't even know, if I had to guess, it would have been the fall, but I don't have a clear enough memory of knowing what time of year it was. But I had been at a friend's house all day, and my mom's boyfriend had come to pick me up at one of the other buildings in our apartment complex. And the way the apartment complex was set up, it was several buildings, but they were kind of clustered together. And in between each cluster was either the pool area, or there were a couple of forested, woodsy areas, and then there was a play area. So to get to my house from my friend's house, we had to go across the somewhat open area, then cross through the playground, and then go into a forested area to get to my apartment. So it was dusk. It was right before dinner time. So it must have been the fall. And my mom's boyfriend was walking a little ahead of me. We were just passing through the playground area, and we were getting ready to enter the forested area. And I don't know if I heard something, but something prompted me to turn around. So I turned around, and I am telling you I'm actually breaking out into goosebumps right now. not more than 10 feet away from me was, and I don't know if there's a better word for them, but it was an alien being, and it was clearly alien. It was very tall, very slender, like stretched. It had the gray skin that you hear about, and very long arms and very long, bulbous kind of, fingers. I almost want to say like ET, who had the bulbs at the end of his fingers. But what is different about this experience, and I've heard with other people, is that he had almost like and I don't know why I know, but it was male. I just know that was, the characteristics would be male, though there was no discerning characteristics, but I got a very male vibe from him. But he had like a hammerhead shark head. So I don't see that often in alien depictions. You normally get those, the triangular alien guys. And I've done minor Google research on this, and some stuff comes up, but it's nothing. I guess it's just nothing that there's not a lot of data, a lot of experiences with that. But he was looking at me, and I wasn't scared. It was weirdly, like I said, it was sort of this tumultuous time in my life. And I turned around, and my immediate impression was that this was a friend. I was immediately at ease. I almost felt like a protective love or something. Like I kind of got the feeling that things were going to be okay. I don't, but I knew instinctively, I could tell that my mother's boyfriend was getting further away from me. And I knew instinctively I was to be quiet, that I was not to draw attention to this experience. And in fact, he brought his left hand up and kind of, did one of his fingers like this. So he knew enough about to indicate for me to be quiet. And I acknowledged it. I just sort of, looked at him, and I just turned around and walked home. And, my life was weird enough that was normal enough for me not to freak out or be scared about it. And it's just one of those things that I have had as a memory my entire life and never talked about it until I think my husband, maybe my cousin, but it wasn't until my 20s that I told anybody about it for the first time. And like I said, it didn't, my paranormal experiences set me off on a lifelong search for for paranormal experiences. Like I'm actually going with one of my best friends on a ghost hunt in a couple of weeks. We've got our little things, and we just have fun. It's like mom's night out where we giggle through the whole thing. But I never had that feeling compelled to research any of the alien stuff. But it was one of those that, I know it to be true. I mean, it's as real of an experience for me as anything else I've experienced.
Wow. So a feeling of peace.
It was a friend, it was love. There was love there. And,
Yeah.
I never felt, and I don't feel like I had memory wiped and that I got, taken or probed or anything like that. But, like even now, our house, we're in a small town in Florida, and we back up our house. We have a big sliding glass door in the back, and it overlooks a retention area. So there's trees, and it's dark out there. Like at night, it's pitch black. And every once in a while, I'll just get an idea, like something will cross through my mind. I wonder if he ever checks in. Like it's nothing substantial, nothing that I can hold on to, but it's something that crosses my mind from time to time.
Yeah,
so.
For sure. Okay, couple questions.
Okay.
One, were there any lights involved? Like, did you see any kind of craft before or after?
No, not at all.
Did he just step out of the tree line, basically?
No, because he was behind me in the open. Without getting too, pedantically, specific, it was if you were leaving my apartment, you'd go through the wooded area, you'd come to the playground area, Then there was a small amount of flat land, then a little grassy knoll that led up to the stairs to the pool area. So he was kind of walking along that small strip of grass that was right before the knoll to the stairs to, so in between the stairs to the pool and the playground area. But it was kind of like, I don't know, even though he was fully exposed, no one, like my mom's boyfriend, wasn't anywhere even remotely aware of his presence.
It's interesting too. And he didn't, this being, he didn't seem too scared of you either. Like he just.
Mm-mm. And I know there were no words spoken.
Right.
So I'm strictly going on how I felt. And I was 8, I was an aware 8-year-old, but I was definitely 8. So, I was a child, but, people underestimate children, and my alarms were not raised. And if I had to really like look at the moment, I almost feel like it was accidental.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oops, she sees me.
Oh,
right.
okay.
So I didn't feel like he was stalking me. I didn't feel like that this was anything purposeful. It was more like we kind of bumped into each other, and it was kind of like, hey, keep going, that kind of thing. But it wasn't like dangerous or anything. It was more of just a mutual respect, and it was very quick.
That leads me down so many other rabbit holes of thought.
Me too. I've thought, I think about it often enough because I felt such affection from him.
Yeah.
That, I just kind of find myself, I don't know, I go down rabbit holes too. So I understand.
Yeah. Another question. Well, before I go off, if he was just kind of there, you turned around, happened to spot each other. That area that you're in at the time, in Northern Virginia, I know
Excuse me.
You were just 8 years old, and I know that was, a while back. But do you know of any other high strangeness, any kind of activity in that area? Like, was it known for that kind of stuff? Was it known for UFO sightings, or?
At the time, I didn't know. Yeah, and obviously that was before the internet, so it wasn't like people were jumping on and sharing their experiences. But like I said, I've only recently felt, I don't want to say comfortable, because I'll tell you anything, right? I'm an open book. So if somebody had asked me at 15, I would have told them, but I've only had an interest in originating this recently.
Okay.
So I joined because we just purchased a home up in the northwest corner of North Carolina. So it kind of brings me back into that Appalachian
absolutely
area that I grew up in. Which then that, I joined this witchy group, which is just kind of for fun, and which led me to the cryptid group. Mm-hmm. And then it's comforting being around people who have had these experiences, because in my little Boy Scout room mom universe, we're not sitting around talking about Mothman, right?
Right.
And so it's nice that I can get my freak on and not have people look at me like I have that second head,
Oh, yeah.
So it was in that cryptid group that I just decided, somebody said, hey, has anybody actually encountered an alien? And I was like, well, I really have. And I was very cognizant during the encounter. It wasn't like I recalled it in some therapy session. I knew it was happening
Right
as it happened. And so when I mentioned what happened in Northwest or Northeast Virginia, a lot of the response was, oh my gosh, that area was crazy active back in the 70s and 80s. Mm. So that wasn't my firsthand experience, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I go very conspiracy theorist on it. It is the suburbs of the nation's capital, so if there is an alien race who's watching this planet, Washington, D.C. would be an area that they would watch.
Definitely.
And they would seek shelter in the thick woods of Northern Virginia because it's so close and they can hide there, that kind of a thing. So that's my reasoning.
That might even work there in DC. You know what I mean?
No, really? You think so? Can I actually tell you a quick funny story?
Yeah.
So I was a school teacher. I lived out in California for a while. So I was an elementary school teacher, and I taught first grade for about a year and a half. So I had this adorable little student, and his mom said that when he was born, he looked like an alien. I mean, he had a very triangular face and big eyes. And my classroom led out onto the blacktop, and he was sick one day and didn't want to go out to PE. He's the 6-year-old little boy. So he asked if he could stay in for PE in the classroom. And I said, fine. And he wanted to know if he could sit at the back door and just watch the other kids playing PE. So I said, yeah, that's not a problem for me. So I'm sitting at my desk, and he's sitting on the floor, just looking out at these other kids playing. And he finally looks at me and he goes, Miss Jennifer. And I said, yes, Colin. He goes, have you ever noticed, and he's almost like in a trance-like state. And he said, have you ever noticed how some people are just people and some people are aliens pretending to be people? And I looked at him and I was like, of all the people for him to say this to, this is the right person to be saying this to. Yeah. And I said, well, Colin, I'm not sure I have fully experienced that. And he was like, oh, well, and I said, am I a person or am I an alien pretending to be a person? And he looked at me and I felt like he was looking at me with x-ray vision. And he goes, no, you're a real person. And I was like, yeah, that's what I thought too. And then he just went back to watching the people on the blacktop. And I thought, my gosh, what is he seeing, or what was his reality at that moment? Yeah. So I think of that in Washington, D.C., that there's definitely people there that are not, that are not people. So.
Wow. He's probably saying, Miss Jennifer, am I putting on a good enough act? Can you,
I know. Can you see me for who I am?
Yeah.
And I should have said, yes, Colin, I actually can, but that's okay.
Wow. Oh, okay. So close to DC. I was asking because if this, I don't know what to call it, he or being or whatever. If it
he works for me, it was anyway. That works. He.
Okay. I was wondering, is there some kind of portal activity or something like that? But if there's no report of lights, don't know where he came from. There wasn't any kind of pop sound or anything like that. He's just there, right?
He was just there, but I can't imagine that he walked in from the parking lot. Do you know what I? Do you know what I mean? I kind of think that maybe there was some, Star Trekky materialization or something that occurred, and which caused me to turn around. But there was no real sound. So if I like in the memory of it, there's no sound at all. Okay. It's just very quiet and peaceful. There was just this very tranquil feeling.
And you said that you have like a kind of like a sensitivity to the paranormal, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
For better or for worse, yeah.
Was that present before this experience?
That's been present since my earliest memories. So,
wow.
Yeah. Okay. I remember. I actually remember being a baby, and people laugh at me for that. I don't have a tremendous amount of memory, but I do have memories of being a baby, and I have very, very distinct memories of laying in my crib, and there was always a shadow of a profile of somebody's head up in the corner. And I remember as an infant having clear conceptual thoughts of, I don't feel in danger, but I don't feel comforted, but I could hear my parents down the hallway watching TV, and I knew I was safe because there were other people in the house, and that just started a whole lifetime's worth of experiences. But my mother had a similar sensitivity, and as I got older, she would say things that I registered as, oh, I have those same things, even though we were a relatively suburban family.
Right.
And then, I've mentioned though that I have a son now who's now 15, but even though I live in the paranormal world, I really wanted to give him a grounded childhood
Yep.
of going to the zoo and being a room mom and Boy Scouts and stuff like that. So I don't shun the paranormal, but I'm not one of those parents that, I love Halloween, but I don't encourage it. And I wasn't showing him scary shows when he was little. We were all about Sesame Street. We lived a very, pastel, rainbowy childhood. But at a very early age, he told me, at 3 years old, we saw a car accident, which led him to tell me of a past life experience of his. And then from then on, for about 3 years, it was nonstop. He came in from outside, and I said, "Why aren't you playing outside?" "Well, the boy in the tree keeps throwing acorns at me." And, there was no boy in the tree, that kind of a thing. So I went, crap, dang it. I was really hoping his childhood would be quieter than mine. And, so it seems to go down the line.
Well, if you don't mind, if you're comfortable with it, why don't you hit me with, what kind of experiences that, your mother relayed to you that you've had as, growing up and coming up in age, and that your son's expressed. I would love to hear, because this generational thing, I'm fascinated.
Yeah. Well, I'm fascinated by it too, because I think, if you met my mom, she was a freak. I loved her, but she was that 1970s Ouija board freaky mom, know? So one would think that she had experiences, if they were self-created or that they just came natural. But then my grandmother, I could not imagine being aware of her next door neighbor, let alone a ghost in the house. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like, I can't. She was such an uptight, very strict woman but I think, she, if it is going down the line, she must have had experiences too. But I just know about my mom and me and my son. So,
and unless it started with your mom, maybe your mom dabbled into something, and
well, I know, because my mom, I have very, and I laugh because I feel that anybody who knows about this era and lives a paranormal life will think that this is so, like, typical. But I have memories of being 6 years old and my mom listening to Heart with her Ouija board. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was so, like, 1978 with, the hippie thing, and the hip huggers and, that kind of a thing. So, she may have created things. And I know her sister, who I didn't know very well, was her older sister, but I know she actually, and I found this out later in life, but it doesn't surprise me, she actually considered herself a witch and dabbled in black magic and stuff like that. And she had a thing with my family. She didn't get along with my mom and didn't like my dad, and there were some issues there. So, it was, and they came from a very suburban, traditional Leave It to Beaver type of upbringing. So maybe my mom, maybe it was created somehow.
Yeah, it could be. So
yeah, but
so what did your mom, did she see things, did hear things? How did it work?
It was very, I think the first time I really became aware of it in my mom was, I want to say almost maybe when I was 10, and, keeping in mind, I had this lifetime's worth of experiences, but she had moved into this house. After she left my dad, there were like a series of guys. So this was one of her boyfriend's houses. And so every time I would go visit her, sometimes she'd be in a new house. And this house was clearly haunted and creepy. They had it decorated creepily. The people who lived there were not happy-go-lucky people. There was a lot of dark furniture and a hex in the house just from that, but lots of dark corners and lots of creaks. And things like that. So, I would go into the house, and I only maybe went in once or twice, and my hackles were raised. And she started to mention how, she was hearing things and seeing things, and in this house in particular. And that was the first time that she spoke to me about this before she left, because when she left, I was raised by my dad and my brother. So before that, when she, 10 years earlier, she didn't talk to me about it. I just experienced it through her. I saw her working the Ouija board. I saw her, doing things, but she didn't necessarily converse with me about it. So this was like the first time that I went, oh, this is her reality as well. So, but, for me, she's living in Southern Virginia at this point, and I'm in my house, in Northern Virginia with my dad, and I'm hearing voices telling me to shush. I guess there's almost like a shush theme on this. But, my brother used to live in the basement, and I would be home alone after school, and I would hear noises downstairs in the basement. So I would open the door and yell down to see if my brother was there. He's 5 years older than me, and I didn't like being in the house alone. And I would get shushed every time I did that. So that was a constant for me. And there were a couple of times when I was in that house and in my bedroom, and I used to have a lot of nightmares, like very vivid nightmares in that bedroom. And both I had those blinds that all you had to do was pull them, and then they would roll back up.
Yep.
So both popped at the same time and rolled up. And another time I was 9 years old. No, I was probably 10, and I was home alone, and I was taking a bath, and the wall to the bathroom also was shared by the master bedroom. And I heard this pounding on the wall, and it was scaring me. It was like I actually felt the other stuff I didn't like, but this was scary. It sounded like a door was being slammed and opened.
Wow.
I get slammed against the wall. And so I got out of the bath, put my clothes on wet, and ran out of the house, shut the door, ran up the street. And we had a nanny at the time who was living with us, and so she had just picked her son up from school, so met me halfway up the hill, and she could see something had happened. I said, I think there's somebody in the house. And we turned around, and I was only like 4 houses away from my house. So she would have been looking behind me. So we turned around and go back to the house, and the front door was wide open. So there was that time.
Yeah.
And then, and tell me if I'm.
Oh no, you're good. You're
Okay. Tell me if I'm telling too many, because I have fun with my haunted stories. But my big experience was when I lived in San Francisco, but I'll tell you about that in a second. My most, I think, fun experience with the paranormal was fast forward into my late 20s, and I'd gotten a call that my mom was getting ready to pass away. So my husband and I flew back to Virginia. We were living in California at the time, and we stayed at a hotel, and my brother and his family had arrived. So it was our first night there, and my brother and I, we got our families settled, and then we went to the hotel desk to see if they had like a conference room that we could use, because he and I needed to sit together in a private space and come to grips with what was happening and kind of go into planning mode, because we knew she wasn't dead yet, but we knew we had a funeral that we were going to be confronted with and so forth. So the hotel was very accommodating, and we sat until 2:00 in the morning discussing all and telling stories and all that kind of stuff. So we had hotel rooms right next to each other, and we walked each other up to our rooms, and we said our goodnight, and our doors were right next to each other. So I go into my room, he goes into his room, and I had already, I'm a big fan of like brushing my teeth and washing my face before I go to bed. And I had already done that. And I was really tired. It was 2:00. So from the time of walking into the room and being in the bed was maybe 3 minutes, right? I was dead tired. I get into the bed and I hear this knock at the door, like a really soft knock. And my first impression was that my brother, this was before smartphones and so forth, right? This was back in 2000. So I got the impression that my brother maybe had forgotten to talk to me about something and needed me to come back out. So I was getting ready to get back up, and then the knock got a little bit stronger, and I got this very clear feeling of don't do that. Don't go to the door. So then I laid back down, and I heard the door handle, like somebody was kind of testing the door handle. So I got the heebie-jeebies, went to sleep, didn't think anything of it. So I get up the next morning, and you have to keep in mind, my brother is 5 years older than me. There is not a paranormal bone in that man's body. He very much lives in the real world. I don't even know if he knows how much I've experienced. He is just a businessman there. That is not his world. So, and he thought my mom was just absolutely crazy. He shared no reality with her on that at all. So, we get up, we shower, we get ready for the day, we go to meet up with them for breakfast. So I go over to his hotel room, and he's looking at me, and he goes, "Oh my Jen, you won't believe what happened after you and I separated last night." So I said, well, tell me. So this is the story he tells me. He said, from the moment I shut the door and got into bed was maybe 5 minutes. And he goes, I fell asleep. And he goes, I heard somebody gently knock at the door. And my first impression was that you needed to talk to me. So I'm sitting there going, I understand the story.
Right.
He said somebody was trying the door handle. So I was getting ready to get up and go check the door. And, he was there with his wife and my niece and nephew. My niece at the time was, I think she was 9. So, you know how when you sleep in those rooms, there's 2 queen beds. So he and his wife were in one bed, and his son and daughter were in the next bed. So he got to get up out of the bed, and at the foot of his bed was a little girl who he thought was his daughter. And he thought maybe she was sleepwalking, and maybe that was the sound at the door. So he was like, Jessica, what's going on? And she didn't move or say anything. So he turned over and turned the light on in the room, because now he's in dad mode, right? And the face that he's looking at, sleeping in the bed next to him, is his daughter. And he turns, and that girl is no longer there. So he's like, can you believe what happened? I was like, actually, I can, So that was,
Wow.
Yeah, I felt validated on that, because my very non-paranormal brother had that experience, and then some.
Yeah, and then some.
And then some. So
I always wonder, like, when somebody is that skeptical, that against it, or not even against it, just not acknowledging it, how do they explain that stuff away?
I don't know, because I almost think they do have a file in their memory cabinet of fun ghost stories.
Yeah.
This will be something that I can whip out at a campfire or something, because everybody, even the most skeptical, they have a story. Most everybody has a story.
Yeah.
But it's filed under the fun, kooky Halloween experience, as opposed to this stuff really exists and it's really there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I got the same. Everybody has a story. I've said that constantly, and everybody's like, well, not me. I don't have one. I have students. I don't have any stories. And then, except for this one time.
But there was this one time when I was 10 or whatever.
Yeah. It's crazy, but yeah.
Yeah. And so then I don't know when I lived in San Francisco, now I have a theory. I don't know if I can share my theory with you.
Of course you can.
But okay. So my degree, I got a degree in English literature at the University of San Francisco. which I found out in the last 5 years or so, that that area of San Francisco, that college is built on the original cemeteries of San Francisco. And when San Francisco was a new city, that was kind of considered the outskirts of the city, which is now it's not the downtown area, but it is definitely San Francisco. It's right near the Golden Gate Park. And that was where they had all their cemeteries. And then when San Francisco in the early 1900s outgrew, or in the late 1800s outgrew their space, then they moved the cemeteries, hopefully, to a town just south of San Francisco called Colma, California. And they built a college right there, which happens to be, of course, the college. And I chose that school because I'm a Grateful Dead fan. So I chose that school because it was 1990 in San Francisco, and I just wanted to go to Grateful Dead concert. So, of course, I choose a college that I later find out is built on 5 cemeteries, but that's a whole other story. So my degree was English literature, and I caught this bit of information in one of my classes, because whenever you hear about a haunted house, it's a haunted Victorian. It's a haunted Victorian farmhouse. It's a haunted. So it's this Victorian era. It's usually, you never hear about the haunted mid-century modern or the haunted, condo in Miami Beach, and I'm sure they do exist, but it's always that Victorian. So I learned in my degree that Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution came around during the Victorian era. And it's the first generation of people that didn't die with the set knowledge that they were going to heaven or hell. That maybe we just come from monkeys and maybe we just die.
That's interesting.
Yes. So they locked and loaded. So they dropped their bodies and they went, I don't know where to go. I don't have any way to move forward. And I think that's why you always hear about the haunted Victorians, right?
I absolutely love that. I've never heard that before in my life.
Yeah. Well, that's the Jennifer theory. So, but being sensitive, going to a college unknowingly on 5 cemeteries and living in a Victorian city, there were freaking ghosts everywhere. And I don't see them, right? I would love to.
Right.
My abilities, for lack of a better word, are really terrible. I don't really flat out hear them. I don't really see them, but I feel them so concretely. I know where they are, and I get stories. So, and even my husband, who's pretty straight-laced, he'll validate it, and I'll just go, oh my gosh, this person is, this is the situation with this person, and he trusts me and so forth. But and I have a kind of a funny little small story to tell you if you want to hear it after that. But so walking around that city was crazy because it's just full of dark Victorians and addicts, and you just know that they're up there just looking out, going, how do I move past this? Yeah. So that was a very long way to preface that I lived in a very haunted Victorian for a year, and it got so excessive that we had to move. And I was living with a series of roommates at the time, and it was right off campus, so it was in that same area that had been the cemeteries. And it started out, I came home early from college one afternoon, and it was early. I maybe had lived in San Francisco for maybe 2-3 months. And the way that the house, it was not a Victorian house, it was in a Victorian, they called them flats. Mm-hmm. So it was like an apartment building, but it wasn't multiple apartments per floor. It was one long stretched out apartment per floor. So it was three stories. We lived on the 3rd story, and all of the front doors were at ground level. So you would enter in, and then we had this really super long, steep staircase that went up to the 3rd floor, and that kind of turned around and then ended up on a landing. in a long, skinny hallway, and then all the rooms went off the long, skinny hallway. So my bedroom door happened to be the door that you first saw when you got up at the top of the stairs and at the landing, and down the hallway to the left was the kitchen and what was the dining room, but we were poor college students, so somebody's bedroom was the dining room.
Right.
And there was one of those, what are they called, those flip doors that go in between, it doesn't lock, but you just push through. So anyway, so I come home from school, I lay down on the bed, I hear, and it's the middle of the afternoon, I hear the front door open and shut. So I go, okay, one of my roommates are coming home. And I hear somebody come up the stairs, and then I didn't hear anything else. So now I'm thinking, we lived in a sketchy part of town. There's, crack dealers on the corner. So I'm like, all right, who's coming to my house? So I get up and go to the bedroom door, and nobody was there. And I peer over the balcony, the banister, to look down, and nobody's on the stairs. So I thought, oh, maybe it was our downstairs neighbors, and I'm just, maybe the noise carried or whatnot. So I got back on the bed, and then very clearly I heard like a man with heavy boots walk down the hallway into the kitchen. So I thought, well, that was weird. That was weird. That was obvious, but that was weird. So I didn't say anything because I've lived this life, and I just, when you get so used to that kind of stuff, you just stop. It stops becoming something that you feel the need to talk about.
Right.
So then the next morning, our male roommate said, would you guys be open to having like a roommates meeting tonight? So we agreed to it, and we show up, after dinner for this roommate meeting. And he goes, I would like to discuss that maybe this house is haunted. So he piques my interest because I had just had this experience. So he said that night he was, he had gotten home late from work. He was in the kitchen. Allison, who lived in the living room or the dining room, wasn't there that night. And he was in the kitchen late making a sandwich. And that door, which had 100 years worth of paint on it. So like we kind of felt good about having Allison in there, because when it was in the door frame, it was jammed in there because the paint stuck it together. So he's eating his sandwich, and all of a sudden that door slams open and slams back shut again.
Oh.
So he was like, has anybody else had the same experience? So I raised my hand, I explained what I had heard. So there was a camaraderie there that, okay, we're not crazy, and maybe something's happening. And so over the course of the next, 8 months or so, it progressively ramped up. We used like idiots, and I'm not a fan of the Ouija board. I know some people will say it's a tool if properly used, and I do not agree with that. I think it draws prankster spirits who at best are wanting to play pranks. At worst, they're wanting to find a way in. You're not talking to your sweet little grandmother on the Ouija board. She'll come to you in dreams. She will,
Thank you.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you feel the same way,
Oh,
obviously.
absolutely, I do.
Yeah. But like dumb 18-year-olds living in a haunted Victorian in San Francisco, we had to get the Ouija board, and you had the planchette moving on its own, flying off the board, which then brought some kind of entity into the living room. And so we left one of my best friends in the living room. She didn't even live in the house. We all went out to the store. We came back. She was like, oh my God. And she had seen this like swirling mist in the corner. I woke up one night and there was a female in the corner singing to me. It was clearly a woman in my bedroom singing me a song, trying to get my attention. One night we all woke up, and there were a group of men in our hallway at the end there where the legit bedrooms were. and they were all talking, and each one of us thought the other one was maybe having a party or had brought people home. And the next morning we were all a bit disgruntled, like it was the school night, and why are you bringing, we're all like, who brought the guys home last night? And each one of us was going, oh my gosh, we thought you were the one. And then it takes a bit of a dark turn, because the roommate who lived in the bedroom that was connected to the kitchen, she started to have some mental health issues. And we would come home from school. She was an artist, and her art, she did a lot of painting in that room, and the art got darker and darker. And there were a couple times I came home and she was sitting on the floor in front of her bed, and she was really like zoned out, kind of like in a trance, and she didn't remember me coming home, that kind of a thing.
Right.
And at Christmas break, she ended up kind of having a mental breakdown, and she moved back home, but she knew she was leaving us all in the lurch. So her parents agreed to still pay her rent through the remainder of the school year. So that room became kind of this dark, oppressing room in the house,
Right.
where it was by the kitchen, but the lights were always off. But you just, I don't know, you just felt something in there, So the springtime came, and like I said, these little things ramped up and up and up. And most of the roommates decided they wanted to move, and I was okay staying there at least through the summer, because it was convenient, and there was parts of the actual house that I liked. So I found a whole new set of roommates to come in, and for the summer they were kind of taking over the leases for the summer. And they were open, we were all just a bunch of hippies living in San Francisco, but I didn't let them know what had been happening in the house. I thought maybe with some people leaving, things would change. So we put two girls, and in hindsight I feel maybe a little bit bad, but we put two girls as roommates in that back room that was, the dining room that was off the kitchen. And one of them had her friend come over who was like a cleanser, a spiritual cleanser. So she just, for fun, was coming in because it was a new space for her friend. She was coming in to sage the house. And to this day, I absolutely hate sage. But she was like, coming in to do her little witchy stuff. And she finished, and she'd spent a lot of time in that back room. And then she knew I was the only original occupant of the house. So she came up to me and she's like, did you know that back door between the kitchen and the dining room is a portal? And I went, tell me more. So she said, yeah, that is crazy messed up back there. She goes, that is some passageway. And, I even to this day, the mom in me goes, okay, this is just crazy what you're saying to me. So even with all my experiences, I'll go, that's just crazy talk that you're talking to me about right now.
Right.
But she's like, this is interdimensional, and there's 3 or 4 different, pathways that are coming through here. And have you ever noticed that this house has a lot of activity, and some are fine and some are very angry? And, and I was like, yeah, maybe we've had some experiences here. So my hackles got a little bit raised. I ended up going back home for the summer, because I just went, I think I need to just disconnect from San Francisco and just go to suburban Virginia for a minute or two, and kind of regain my sense of identity. And then when I came back in the fall, I was not interested. The house was now dark, and the people who had moved in were dark. So I found my own place 4 doors down. And I look out, I'm again on the 3rd floor, and there's an air shaft right by my front door. And there was a black pentagram that was painted. So I just went, you can't find normalcy in San Francisco. I just need to let you know this now, that wherever you go, there's something, So I lived there for 3 months, and that apartment burnt down. I had there was I didn't know at the time, but there was a crack house next door, and some lady in the bottom floor had fallen asleep with crack pipe, and lit up through the other air shaft, and it took the back apartments in my apartment out. And so, but it didn't surprise me that it happened in that little grouping, of buildings, because it just had some bad show. But then, like 5 years later, I met this guy who's really good friends with the people who lived on the middle floor of that original building. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe somebody who lives at this address. And I was like, ours was crazy haunted. He was, no way, because they're having issues now.
Wow.
And so he started telling me about all the stuff that his friends were telling him about, and it mimicked exactly, what I was going through. So again, it felt validating that was. But now I can say I lived in a haunted Victorian in San Francisco, and I've got some street cred on that. So.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe whoever that was that said there was a portal on the back door or whatever, maybe they were pretty legit too.
Yeah, well, in hindsight, at that time, I'm still in that ignorance and bliss of youth where, my experiences are real, but you're full of crap, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
we all stay in that, I think.
Yeah. So I was very easy to discredit her. Oh, you're just some sage shishi foo foo hippie, where now I look back and go, she was probably at 18 years old, very awake and very in tune with what was going on in the world. So.
Oh, wow. And you said that this ability, this sensitivity has passed on to your son.
It has. And, I don't know how popular your podcast is, but they have no idea. My husband and son are in the other room right now. And I told them I was on some scout meetings, that they have no idea that I'm sitting here talking about the paranormal. So I hope this doesn't come back to bite me in the butt, but he at a very, very early age, said things that I knew, but I didn't put too much into it. As an example, when he was 3, we were driving to Barnes and Noble storied toddler time, and we experienced across the street from us at this intersection a really bad car accident. And I was going to turn around to help, but then I saw people were rushing to the scene. So I knew that situation was covered. So I just decided to go on my way. But my son had seen it and he knew something was occurring. He was old enough now to know. So he said, Mom, I need to tell you a story, and he's now verbal for the first time. At 3, they're just now being able to. And as a side story, prior to this, if there was anybody who felt the need to talk to my son, and I would highly recommend, people never talk to toddlers because they're afraid of getting stuck into some gobbledygook,
Right.
conversation. But you hear the most amazing things from toddlers if you actually quiet yourself enough to talk to them.
Yeah.
So anyone who might be watching this, I highly recommend that. But my son, as he was learning to talk, the things that he wanted you to know was that he had 2 best friends, that his favorite color was yellow by far. And then there was like a certain car he would see and he'd get very excited. And it was, I don't know cars, but it was one of those 1970s kind of cars, right? And so, and just before this experience happened, we had driven by, it was a Sunday and it was just the local community college. And my son pointed at that college and he goes, oh, my brother used to go to school there. He doesn't have a brother, and there's no way that he would have known this was a community college. So little things like this that, I was picking up on my son, but this real big thing happened when he was 3 and we're driving, we see this car accident and he goes, Mom, I need to tell you something. Oh, and he also had a fascination with firemen. Like we had his baby room was all fireman themed, that kind of thing. So he proceeds to tell me this story that before he came into our family, he was in another family. And he had 2 best friends that he loved. And he had this yellow car that, and he explained it. And it's the kind of car that, And it had been, I got the idea that it was like an old secondhand car that, but he loved it. And he was driving to school and he got into a terrible car accident. And his two friends got out of the car. And this is all because he had just seen this car accident, right? So he said that his two friends were able to get out of the car, but he was not. And that is how he came to be in our family. And he said the firemen got there and tried to help, and they worked really hard. And I feel bad for them that they were not able to help. And can you help me find them to thank them for their efforts? And clearly, he used his own toddler language, but this was what was communicated to me. And so again, I just, I just turned around and I didn't want to make it more traumatic for him.
Yeah.
But I just looked at him and I thanked him for trusting me enough to tell me that story. And that I'm really sad that you had to go through something like that. But I'm really, 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 really glad that you're here. And I really, really, really love being your mom, and I'm going to take care of you.
Yeah.
And we're going to have a lot of fun. And I've kept that promise. So, but that's when I felt glad that I was his mom so that he wouldn't get poo-pooed.
Right.
But then I know what that's like you don't fit in at birthday parties when you're seeing things, you know what I mean? You don't get along with the soccer kids when you're seeing ghosts up in the trees, that kind of a thing. Yeah. There was another time we were driving through, we went back to, and he was younger than that. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm talking too much.
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Get me going. But when he was probably 2.5, just slightly before this, was when he became verbal. He was very verbal for about 2 years, where a lot of things came out of him. But we had gone back to Illinois to visit my in-laws, and my husband had lived there for a short period of time in high school, and he wanted to take us to the local cemetery. And it's not what you think, because my husband is not that kind of guy, right? But the cemetery is a unique cemetery that it's on like parkland. So it's extraordinarily beautiful, lots of hills and lots of trees, that kind of a thing. And though my husband has had some experiences of his own, he hasn't, he doesn't live in this world. He's, right. This old house kind of guy, and would rather be, fixing, something on the porch than talking about ghost stories. He's always like, why are you always listening to ghost stories? And it's because I feel validated that I'm not the only one. Yeah. Anyway, so we drive through this cemetery, and I have to say, as the cemeteries go, and I don't feel compelled to visit them. Just I like to go to school on top of them. But I'm not one of those that I like want to go, do anything with cemeteries.
Right.
But my son's little at the time, so he's in a car seat, and he's still little enough that the car seat is tipped upwards, so he's more looking at the ceiling. So at this age, he would have had no concept of seeing the grave sites, the tombstones. But even if he did see them, he wouldn't have known what they were. Right. But they were hard to see because the cemetery was in the woods and in the forest, and it was pretty. But he says to me, he goes, Mom, I don't like it here. There's too many people up in the trees. Oh. And I just went, holy crap. And even my husband was like, you can't ignore that, because he wouldn't know that we were in a place of dead people, Right. So, but he got very uncomfortable. He said, there's too many people up in the trees. And he did comment on, he used to play in our backyard all the time, and we have a big oak tree in the backyard. And when he was about 7, he came in and we said, well, why aren't you outside playing? Because he was having a great time. He had like a little fort and stuff out there. And he goes, the boy in the tree is throwing things at me. And he never went back out there, never went back out to play.
Oh my God.
So, lots of, but when it became where I couldn't ignore it, was he was probably 9, and he'd had these experiences, and we didn't poo-poo him or anything, but I didn't share with him that I was this way too, right? Because I was still very much in little people land, and I just wanted to go to birthday parties and not be the weird family.
Right.
I grew up in the weird family, and anyway, I've come to learn that once you're weird, you're weird. But how hard you try to hide it. But we went to this area of North Carolina that we really love, and we now own property up there. And they have this really cute little downtown area, and they have and it is, it's a cute little restaurant, but it's in an old house, right? So, and I had been told that this restaurant was really good, and I really wanted to go there. So we go in, and I love old homes. I love old farmhouses. I like those things. So I was really happy to be there, and we were seated in what was the attic of the home, but it wasn't creepy. It's like, it's where ladies go to brunch. It was a quiche and crepe kind of a place. It was not a haunted basement type of environment. But it was clearly in an old house, and there was like an old hidey hole door over in the corner for storage, right? And I swear to you, and this is where, again, where I don't see things, I just know things. But it was very clear to me that there was an old servant that still lived in the house. She didn't understand why so many people were there, and it was blocking her way to this hidey hole, and she was needing to store things and take care of the house for the family. And she was very agitated, right? That there were people in her space. And I wasn't seeing anything. I just knew, right? I just knew. Well, at the same time, I'm sitting there and I'm just trying to eat my quiche and drink my mimosa. You know what I mean? I'm trying to just sort of do the normal thing.
Right.
And my son is getting more agitated and more agitated. And Mom, we need to go. I don't like it here. I don't like it here. We need to go. And I'm getting mad at him because I just want to have a dang piece of quiche and, have a nice lunch and just enjoy our vacation. And he never acts that way. He's a real easy kid. And he's a real easy kid to travel with. So I just found myself going, but I was mad at him. I wasn't patient, right? Very rarely do I get mad. And at that moment, I'm upset that this lady just needs to chill out. I just want to eat my lunch. My husband wants to go because my son doesn't want to be there. My son's being a little jerk. It was sort of this really angsty moment. So we storm out of this restaurant. Instead of it being this really loving family experience, it was angst and agitation. And so I turn around to get angry at my son, and he goes, Mom, I'm sorry, but that lady was bugging me. She made me feel uncomfortable.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I went, the lady who was trying to put the things away in the hidey hole? And he goes, yes. And I looked at him and I just grabbed his face, and now I fully understood. And I just said, I saw her too.
Yeah.
And even though he didn't see her,
Right.
and he looked at me, and this sense of relief flooded over him. And he said, you saw her too? And I said, yes. And I didn't like her. And she had me all worked up too. I said, it's okay. I said, this happens to me too. And it's okay. We're going to be okay. And so you could just feel the weight of the world, fall off of him. And he'll share with me, even to this day. He'll talk to me, like when my father passed away. My father hung around here for a long time and didn't hang out with me, hung out with my son, but that was to be expected because he liked my son exponentially better than me. But now, he's 15 and he doesn't have any interest in the paranormal, and he doesn't understand why I go on ghost hunts and why it's fun to me. So he's still open to it. He just is not interested in it. So.
Wow. But I love that. I love that he has you too. Hold on.
It works. And my husband even, because like I said, my husband does not, he's had a couple experiences of his own, but nothing really too profound. And he validates that both my son and I are this way. But he jokingly will look at us because my son and I are like two peas in a pod, and he'll go, how did I get into this family? But he says it with, with a lot of love in his heart. But,
Right.
Nolan and I was a safe place for Nolan to land when he, as a parent. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of the things that he would say to you, it reminds me, I had a girl in my class. I teach high school. So it's like 9 through
okay.
12. But I had a girl graduate last year that I don't think she listens to the show, but she had a real hard time. Like she couldn't really stay in class very much. Like
Okay.
they actually, I think they had her stay down like the special needs room, for the most
Okay.
part, honestly. Because they said that she had all these diagnoses of, mental health diagnosis, and that was on paper. But when she would talk to me, it was, you know, she's a psychic medium, and she could see auras, and there's constantly people interrupting class.
Yeah.
There was somebody around me that she said, I'm trying my best to pay attention to you.
How
And
can you sit and do math when you're aware of
exactly,
something like that?
exactly.
Yeah.
And she dressed very eccentrically. You know what I mean? Like she
Right.
was 100% her own person. And you could tell she was just tormented though. Like
Yeah, it
there's a
is.
lot going on up there. And, the kids found out that I have a show, and I actually let some of them come on the show to talk.
Okay.
Several kids, it was on one of my anniversary episodes. Several of the kids, their story related to a time they spent with her. Like they would have
Okay.
sleepovers, and she would do readings, and
Okay.
how spot on she is. And other teachers were talking about how spot on this girl is with these. She's telling you about this stuff.
I can honestly say that I'm actually jealous of people like that because
Yeah.
my experiences are so watered down. It's I've got a feeling or I just knew.
Yep.
But when you can just flat out see it and hear it and it's in your face,
Yeah.
I think it's a cool ability, and I hope she can not be labeled as mentally ill and is able to find a way to embrace this
Yeah.
ability that she has.
And she don't fight it. She said it was a big distraction, but she graduated. She made it through high school. But yeah, she's even like her senior year, she missed school for a couple of days because she went somewhere to help cleanse a house and stuff. You know what I mean?
That's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, go for it. If
Uh,
I'm all about it, if that's what she wants.
well, so I'm a big fan of. Are we allowed to mention specific shows?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I watch a ton of the paranormal shows. And again, my husband's like, why do you watch them? And I say, it's a validation that I'm not out here alone, totally wacky, right? So my two favorite paranormal shows are Ghost Hunters, and then the technical spinoff is Kindred Spirits. I think the two hosts there do a phenomenal job in really trying to help the spirits. They're not there to just agitate. They find the story and they try to help them, and I appreciate that greatly. So the owner or the female lead on the show has a travel company that it's a haunted travel a company that she does, and so it's called Great Escapes, and so she hosts these like mini paranormal conferences every year, and she does that once a year in St. Augustine. And a year ago I went because I live in Florida, and if you want to ever know that the world has ghosts, you need to go to the St. Augustine lighthouse, because that's just in your face, kind of experience. So a friend of mine and I went. Now, my friend has not had experiences, but she loves the stuff, but she has not had experiences. And so we went to this and we did like a, midnight guided ghost hunt with the stars of kindred spirits, and they had a ghost box there. And there was a young kid yelling at us through the ghost box to get out, to get out. And my friend, I was all alive. I was like, this is the best moment of my life. And my friend was like, I was literally having to hold her and soothe her.
Yeah.
And anyway, I just think that it's fun when you can have solid experiences and it's not so ethereal,
Right.
and it just leads me back to the student that you had, that it's nice that she has a concrete ability and she has a concrete connection with it, and it's not just living in the shadows for her.
Right.
So anyway, so
Yeah.
it's neat that you had a student like that.
Yeah. It was interesting, because she would read my aura. She's like, talking about my light. I talked about it on the show and stuff before, but I guess I had a blend of light that she was seeing, and
Okay.
she said it was like very flattering. Okay. One of the colors, I forget now, I think it was red. She said, but it was that I spoke truth or whatever, and so I was red somewhere, and then she said my feet were white because I walked in the light, she said. And I was like,
Oh.
that's cool. I'll take it.
Well, it's kind of like that one student I had who saw like half alien people.
Yeah.
It's nice when you get validated that it's like good for people who can see these things, that he didn't call me some snaky like alien person who lived in the swamp. He was,
Right.
like, no, you're one of the good ones. So to have a student who can see these things and have the good things to say to you, that's very validating.
Yeah, it felt good.
Yes.
Is there anything that jumps out, Jennifer, that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to?
No, I think that pretty much, covers it. I, would just want to say, because I don't know, you're new to me, this whole, like that cryptid Facebook page where I found you is new to me. And that's more of just a passing interest. I think I was maybe looking to see that there would be some creatures up in the mountain that I just purchased, so that I could like be up there and, but so I don't know really who your audience is, but if there are, I enjoy talking about this because I'm a fairly subdued person. I'm not, I live a very maternal suburban life. So, there are people out there who are having all kinds of experiences, and you never know who you're talking to. And if you are experiencing this and feeling that you shouldn't be or couldn't be, just know that it's okay, but it's, you can embrace it and still live another kind of life too. It doesn't have to be a problem for you.
I really
And
appreciate that.
real quick, just because your student, you jogged a memory of mine. When I was very little, maybe 6 or 7, I was watching TV on a Sunday afternoon, and why they even showed this movie on a Sunday afternoon, I'll never know. But again, it was the late 70s and they did things like that. But if you've never seen this movie, I would highly recommend it. I think it was done in 73, and it's called Let's Scare Jessica to Death. And the premise of the movie, it's actually a phenomenal movie, but it is sad and scary as hell. The premise is that Jessica is being picked up. She's had been living in New York City, and the movie starts with her being picked up by her husband and her husband's best friend from a mental institution. And they've decided she's had an issue. Clearly she had to be hospitalized. And the movie starts with them picking her up, and they're now moving out of the city, moving up to upstate New York into an old Victorian farmhouse,
Of course.
out in the middle of nowhere, to recuperate and start a new, quieter, grassrootsy kind of life. And as the movie progresses, a character comes in that is clearly, it's like a vampire ghost kind of a thing, but it's done in that beautiful early 70s creepy way. and Jessica's hearing voices and tapping into something, and everybody's calling her crazy. And then I'm not ruining the movie because the movie is phenomenally creepy, but it ends up the whole town has been under the guise of this Victorian vampire ghost, and they're all like these pseudo vampire humans, and Jessica's now the only one left, and she's in the middle of a lake on a boat, and it ends there, and you feel so bad. But the thing that is excellent about this movie is because it walks that line: is this woman mentally ill, or is she exceptionally awake?
Yes.
And has been poorly guided into thinking she has mental illness instead of actually realizing that she has these abilities. And it ends up she was right. The people in her life were not good, and she was hearing the real voices and stuff like that.
Yes.
So, and I often wonder how many people are labeled as mentally ill that actually just have these sixth senses.
I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah.
All my heart.
I'm sure there's some real crazies out there, but
well, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are, but yeah, I think
given day, but
way more often than not, it's something extrasensory that we need to be aware of.
Look at. Yeah, and if they had been validated instead of made wrong, maybe they'd be living a significantly different life. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed having you on, and I feel like
I've enjoyed communicating with you.
I feel like there's a lot more to get into.
There is, but it's it's minutia. There, I had one other here, spaceship experience. It was like teeny tiny, just a little blip.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like we were just closing off, and maybe I should tell that story, but. It was here. I told you we have this big water retention area. We live in a townhouse community, and our house borderlines the big water retention area. And we were having like a little block party, and I was outside, and I looked over to the side. Something, caught my eye, and I looked over, and it was a triangle. I'm very bad at geometry, so I don't know the shape of the triangle, but not all sides were equal. Two sides were very long and then a short one, and it was shimmery. And I'm using very Star Trek-y language for this, so just forgive me. But it almost seemed like a malfunctioning cloaking device. Where the thing was, it was right at dusk, again, at dusk.
Yeah.
And so it caught the shimmer, almost like mercury. It kind of had the shimmer of mercury, and it just shot straight up into the sky. And it was maybe a 3-second blibbit of my life. And I even mentioned it to my husband.
Right.
And I love the man because he didn't go, I'm married to a crazy lady. He just went, okay. He knows me well enough by now, that he gets the brunt of my experiences. And that was it. I didn't make anything of it. I didn't, go on some life journey. I had that little blibbit of, as you and I have discussed, that I've heard that the little bit of research I've done with extraterrestrials is that usually it's not a one-off experience.
Right.
And if you see them, it's purposeful, and they usually check in on you from time to time. So though I've not had anything as blatant as that one when I was 8, I just have had a little nugget of, I wonder if he or they, ever check in. And so when I saw that happen, I thought, and I've had other people say this area, I kind of live in the Clearwater area of Florida, that other people have had sightings here that weren't too different than mine. But it made me wonder because I live in a where they could park in privacy, there's space out there. So I just have had a very low grade curiosity as to whether or not I've been checked in on. Yes. But I don't feel like I've been abducted or any of that. So now I'm done.
Well, that brought me back to a couple more questions I had, just real quick.
Okay, that's not a problem.
About the description of this hammerhead alien being.
Right.
For lack of better terms, I'm sorry.
That's how I describe it. Those is clearly, a hammerhead.
It was super tall, right?
But I was also 8, so
good point.
you know,
Do you-
everybody was super tall to me at that. I would say he was in the 6 to 8 foot range if I had to put something on it now.
Okay. 6 to 8 foot. That sounds good. I'll take that. And this is kind of odd, but it's very specific. How many fingers did it, when it raises its hand up? Did it have 4? Did it have 6? Did it have?
Yeah, I want to say, I mean, I really just very aware of the shushing, you know, and it was very gentle, very kind, but very aware of that motion. I want to say 5,
Okay.
but I didn't register that specifically.
Okay.
But that's the number that it comes to mind.
Okay.
That it seemed like it was, you know, he was clearly not human. This wasn't somebody who was like in a costume or anything,
Right.
but he did have, if I had to guess, or if I was pushed into, you know, saying it would be 5 fingers.
Okay. And I just asked that because sometimes people fixate on certain things, like obviously his head and wrinkly skin is something you could fixate more attention to detail on.
Right.
Some people, like I talk to a lot of people that have had Sasquatch encounters.
That's the mother load.
Yeah. And sometimes they'll just like, they cannot get over the width of his shoulders, or, you know,
Okay.
the size of the mouth and stuff like that. And so they just kind of hyper fixate on something. And I didn't know maybe if you caught attention to the hand or.
No, really, what if I were to fixate on something, is if you would say that a little girl encountered an alien being at dusk in a very tumultuous time in her life, you would think that that would be a very traumatizing, scary moment in that child's life, right? That could make her afraid of the dark and make her not want to ever be alone. You know, that could have been a very pivotal turning moment.
Absolutely.
And the thing I always land on is that it was a friend when I needed a friend. There was so much love and kindness. And like I said, I feel that the meeting was accidental. I don't feel that he had been sent to find me or to encounter me.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like it was an encounter for him as well, you know, but there is no fear, none. If anything, I would have probably preferred to go off with him, the kindness that he emanated. There was a friend that was a safe place, and it gave me hope. And because, like I said, it was a real tumultuous time in my life, and so it was like a first glimmer of that there's goodness out there, and it's in the form of an alien being, but there is actual love and kindness and goodness out there, and it made me feel very good. It was a very like a needed moment of love, and I got it from this alien being with a hammerhead. I can't explain it in any other way.
I'm glad you got it. You know?
Yeah, me too.
I'm glad you got it, and that it's worked out the way it has. It sounds like you've had a pretty fun life, pretty good life in the long run.
Yeah, it's been a great life, and I wouldn't have it now any other way. But it is not easy being a child who can see things. It takes you out of the group.
Right.
And so, you know, that I would just, if anybody out there can relate to that, or if anybody out there knows a child who is a little off, know that they're not off by choice. They've got things going on, and, you know, have some compassion for it, because it's hard, you know, when you see the kids coming from the normal families and doing fine at birthday parties and going to swim class and all that, and you're the little kid who's talking to ghosts in the corner. You know, it's not an easy thing to be. So
absolutely. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure it'll help somebody. I get emails all the time. You know, a guest comes on, and I'll get thank you for having them on emails.
That's great.
So I'm sure your email, your session with me here, it's gonna help somebody.
Well, it almost feels like a therapy session. So
well, that's my background. Not therapy, but counseling. You know.
Okay, well, you're very comfortable to talk to, so this has been fun.
So I appreciate having you on.
Okay.
Anytime you want to come back, just holler at me and we'll bring you back on
Okay.
the show. Okay.
Well, I'd love to have our paths cross again. So thank you
Absolutely.
very much.
Hey, thank you. You have a good evening.
All right.
Good
Yeah, you
weekend.
too. Thanks. Yeah. Bye.
Bye bye.